time in Jamaica. It's now time for the big story. U.S. State Department has placed 4 Eastern Caribbean nations, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia, on a watch list due to concerns over their citizenship by investment CBI program. These countries have been given 60 days to meet new benchmarks, with a deadline to submit an initial action plan by next Wednesday. Potential visa bans or restrictions may be imposed on nationals of these countries if they fail to comply. The memo cites concerns over the sale of citizenship without residency requirements and alleged incidents of anti-American activity, like whatever that is. This morning we're joined by Professor Basil Wilson, retired Provost of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and returning this morning is immigration attorney at law operating in the United States of America, Opal Lee. First of all, good morning, Prof. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Richard Lee. I'm doing well.
All right, welcome once again, Prof. And good morning, Miss Lee. How are you doing?
I'm doing very wonderful. Good morning, Richard Lee. Good morning to your other guests as well, and good morning, of course, to your listeners. Thanks for having me again.
All right. Thank you both for joining me for the big story. I'll start with you, Miss Lee. What do you see as the potential consequences for individuals from these countries if the U.S. imposes like visa bans and other restrictions that are threatened?
Well, we can see, the most important thing is their citizens, right? That they will not be able to travel to the United States, of course, except for maybe some minor alterations but the thing is that even for the economy, because, even with the trade going back and forth between the United States and these countries. But, one thing that I saw and noticed, which would be, is that what the U.S. is saying, that, of course, they want these countries to tighten up their restrictions or to explain what is in place to make sure they're not just giving away, quote-unquote, residences to these countries. They want to make sure that there's a safety net in place. I noticed one of the caveats is that they're saying that unless these countries are willing to accept third country nationals removed from the U.S., that, I think, is like a light bulb going off, like what's the ultimate motive towards them doing this? Because, U.S. right now, we're in a state where we're trying to remove as much undocumented, or, well, not me, but you know what I mean, the U.S. They're trying to remove as much undocumented immigrants as possible, or immigrants that they believe have overstayed, and some of their own countries do not want to accept them back into the United States, into their countries. And so maybe if these Caribbean countries are willing to go ahead and accept them, then maybe they'll tighten up and they won't go after them so much and do the travel ban for their, affecting their citizens. Because their citizens want to come to the United States, Richard. They have family members here. They have business going on here. It's going to be tough implications for if these travel bans were to go into.
I can see that happening indeed. Now, Professor, the U.S. concerns may, some would say, be driven by issues such as money laundering or tax evasion, even security threats. What would you say are the key factors that are driving these concerns in the U.S. over the CBI programs in these countries?
Well, what's paradoxical is that citizenship is for sale in the United States. The U.S. has been encouraging people to purchase citizenship in the United States. In fact, we just have recently where they had this bogus notion that there was genocide against white farmers in South Africa. And we brought in about 59 white South Africans. Some of them weren't farmers. And we gave them citizenship over information that was really quite conspiratorial and was far from being authentic. One of the things that, if you look at the sale of citizenship in the Caribbean, many of these countries have become dependent on the amount of money that is raised. Certainly that is the case in St. Lucia, in Dominica, and in Antigua, Barbuda. And what the U.S. is saying is that constitutes something of a national security risk because these people can have bought citizenship, can have entered the United States, and constitute some kind of risk because they're not properly vetted. So I guess one of the issues that the U.S. will be looking at in the 60-day reprieve, that they would have to, in fact, change the nature of the vetting process, as well as the attorney mentioned about taking third-party deportees. Now, a lot of these countries don't have the capacity to accommodate people who are returning from the States who are being deported or who might have criminal records. I mean, I know St. Kitts Nevis have had a serious problem of criminality, and those countries are pretty, in terms of their social well-being, that's pretty delicate, and I think that's an unreasonable demand to request of them. I think it's reasonable to say that you can tighten up your vetting regarding citizenship, but to include that you should take people who are deported, I think that's really being totally unreasonable.
So, Ms. Lee, if these countries fail to meet the new benchmarks, can nationals of these countries still apply for U.S. visas, or are they going to be facing restrictions themselves?
Well, if it goes, because they're just in the planning mode right now, and so we'll see if it, in fact, they're not able to tighten up. Then guess what? They would join the other countries that were already listed on the other travel ban that we discussed on your last program. And
Yes.
as we see, there are certain exceptions on those travel bans. For example, it listed those who already had, well, we don't know, right, if it's going to be similar to that. But the ones that are currently in place now, we know for sure it states that whoever had a visa up until, I think, June 9th, they were safe to continue traveling. And it also made it clear that if you are a green card holder of that country, or it wouldn't affect certain immigrants' visas, for example. And it also made an exception for, we have the football, the soccer coming up here in the United States that the U.S. is going to be hosting. I'm just here wondering now, it should be a little bit off track if the organizers of FIFA is going to be thinking, wait a minute now, should we change venue from the U.S.? Because all these countries are now going to be on this travel ban. But again, depending on what after the 60 days is up, I'm pretty sure if they're going to add them to this current travel ban, the other persons, I don't know if it's going to be the same like what's already in.
Many people are concerned about what might happen, and I'm sure that FIFA is noting and maybe already are contemplating their next move if things continue the way they are. Professor, I've been hearing of the Interim Regulatory Commission in this whole matter regulating CBI program. Can you shed some more light on it, the Interim Regulatory Commission, and what it really hopes to accomplish?
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
What I would imagine is that with the CBI, that has become an issue in terms of America's National Security Council, and that based upon the restrictions that have recently been taken, where they have now banned a number of countries, including certain countries in Africa and in Asia, and other restrictions being imposed, that there's a tightening taking place that might include other countries. And in fact, as was mentioned, not only is the Gold Cup going on at present, there's a Club World Cup going on in the United States.
Yes.
And there's a World Cup that is replayed next year. And even a country like Iran that has qualified for the World Cup is not war with Israel. So the world is becoming increasingly complicated. And all of these travel bans are going to be very difficult to execute, and they're going to have to be exceptions in fact, allowed. Take, for example, Haiti played yesterday against Saudi Arabia, and there's a ban on, there's a ban on Haitians. And so a lot of these restrictions are going to make it much more difficult for cultural events to take place, for world football, world activities having to do with sports to really manifest itself, especially in the United States. Those restrictions do not apply to Canada and Mexico, who are an integral part of next year's World Cup, but a lot of those restrictions are being imposed in the United States.
Yes, and just to mention, Jamaica plays Guatemala at 9 o'clock tonight. Jamaica
tonight,
yes.
Yes.
For those football fans out there. So, Ms. Lee, looking ahead, what do you see as the sort of the long-term consequences of this policy on the region?
Well, the long-term effects, we know that America is built by immigrants. I don't think anybody can dispute that. And so even in our diaspora, we depend on traveling to the United States. We have family members. We have people who, have migrated. They have their spouses, their children. And so that is going to have a very much of a negative effect on family reunification. It's going to have maybe mental effects on the Caribbean to be able, can you imagine being separated from your spouses? I saw an article the other day where somebody from one of these countries was supposed to be getting married, next month. And of course that is now off because that country was placed on the travel ban. And so economic as well, because, even migrating to the United States, a lot of people depend on the working in the United States, hard working, and sending money back to these countries, right? These Caribbean countries for their family members and relatives. And so that again is going to be a negative. It's going to be negatively affecting them. Of course, we talk about even student visas. Yes. Even in the universities, we talk about people coming to the United States to get these education. All of that, Richard B. is going to be affected.
You're so right. You're so right, Ms. Lee. And I'm going to give you my final question this morning, Professor. I mean, nations like Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia. With this facing them, what do you think they can do starting now to sort of improve their CBI programs to meet this new U.S. benchmark or these benchmarks?
Well, many of these countries have experienced diplomats, and they have to enter into serious negotiations with the State Department and to get some kind of assurance that the people who are given citizens will be either forced to reside in the country or will not constitute a threat to the United States. But what I think that is really disheartening is that you really have this close relationship between the Caribbean and the United States in terms of tourism, in terms of the diaspora community, in terms of remittances, in terms of culture. And it just seems that the U.S. has become so arbitrary in terms of the decision making. Every month, every couple of weeks, there's a new dispensation taking place. And to really function in that kind of arbitrariness and that kind of unpredictability, I mean, that's just so astounding and brings about a certain amount of instability in the social well-being of those countries that, to me, upsets a lot of the kind of well-being that should be taking place between the Caribbean and its closest neighbor, where there's a thriving trade relationship, thriving movements of people. I mean, you look at Jamaica, over 4 million tourists travel to Jamaica each year. We're talking about maybe increasing it to 5 million for 25. And yet still, you're subject to this kind of arbitrary decision-making coming out of the White House and also the State Department. You need a far more kind of mature decision-making and diplomatic relationships to be established.
Most definitely. We agree with that. I'd like to thank you, Professor Basil Wilson, retired Provost of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And a big thank you also to Attorney at Law, Immigration Attorney Opal Lee. Thank you both for your time and your thoughts this morning, and I wish you both a great day. Thank